Welcome to On the Fly College Edition, a podcast presented by Playfly Sports. I'm your host, Gene Defilippo. Playfly Sports is the full-service marketing and media company bringing digitally enabled innovations to the sports industry. Welcome to this week's On the Fly. I'm your host, Gene Defilippo, and this week's guest is Joe Parker, the very successful Director of Athletics at Colorado State University. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Gene, thank you. It's a privilege to be with you today.
Well, we've been friends for a long, long time, and I admire what you've done at Colorado State. But before we go there, you've had some great experiences. Following a career at Michigan, where you were a three-time All-American swimmer, captain of the team, tell everybody listening out there your path to where you got to where you are now.
Yeah, you bet, Gene. I love my experience as a student at Michigan. I think it was what most student athletes experience, just transformational, the access to education. I was a first generation college student. The assistance of the financial aid to kind of alleviate that burden from myself and my family. But yeah, it made me really think a lot about what I wanted to do with my professional career. And I didn't necessarily act on those feelings at first. I went into the private sector for a couple of years and then ended up pivoting into graduate school at the University of Texas. And it was while I was there that I thought, I've got an opportunity. I'm on a college campus to learn really more what it would be like to be an administrator in intercollegiate athletics. When I was at Michigan, my principal relationship was with my coach, and I knew there was a director of athletics, but I didn't know kind of all the in-betweens, right? The whole infrastructure that supports the experience and the people that are involved with doing all the jobs that create the experience for students. So when I was at UT, my first semester, I scheduled an informational interview with everyone that was titled as an associate athletics director and asked them for 20 minutes, 30 minutes of their time. And I just basically said, what's been your life journey? What put you in your role? What got you excited about the work you're doing? And where do you think your career pathing? And the final person I met with was a fellow named Robert Brewer. And Robert was the associate AD for development. And that's where sort of I had that epiphany moment. I'd done a sales and marketing role in the private sector. And I realized that, that skill set is kind of what you're doing when you're in the development space. And just the planets aligned. I ended up getting a full-time internship with Robert my second year of grad school, and I tried never to look back. And so time in Texas was 5 years, including school and working there after graduation, and then ended up at Washington State University in, again, a development role running the annual fund. And that was fun and unique because my boss, my coworker, was Chris Del Conte, who's now at the University of Texas. And so Chris and I were only together for about 13, 14 months, and he went to Arizona. I went to the University of Oklahoma to work with a close friend of yours, Joe Castiglione. And I was director of the Sooner Club while I was at Oklahoma. That was 4 years, and 4 really special years. It was a really young staff. I mean, that was Kirby Hokut was on that staff. Jenny Bramer was on that staff. Rick Hart was on that staff. Matt Trantham, Jeff Long. So all people that pivoted to go to other universities and do great things. And then I had a chance to go to the University of Michigan, and obviously returning to my home state and a place that I care deeply about, and be on that staff for 8 years and work with some really wonderful, highly talented people. And Bill Martin was the athletics director at the time, and Bill was just an amazing person in so many ways, has more bandwidth than anyone I've ever worked with. At the time, he served as the director of athletics for about half that time. He was also president of the USOC. And of course, his career before higher ed was, and still he returned to it, was in real estate development, and just highly talented guy. So I learned a ton from Bill, and I was there 8 years. That's the longest we've ever been in one place. And then I felt, a need to grow, and ended up at Texas Tech University working with Kirby Hocutt, who is the director of athletics there. And he gave me an opportunity to serve as chief operating officer, deputy AD. And that's where I really began to have a really comprehensive understanding of all the things it takes to lead a department. And Kirby was so unique in so many ways because it was shared leadership. He's a very selfless person, very humble person. And I felt it was my obligation just to channel his leadership into the department, and really, support him. He kept most of the duties associated with liaisoning to the executive leadership of the institution and the board. But after that, everything on a day-to-day operations basis was kind of, offered to me as a way to learn and grow. And while I was there, I had interest obviously in still continuing to advance my career, and had a chance to compete for the opportunity to be the director of athletics here at Colorado State. And that was now it's over 7 years ago, and was able to stand up and compete for this job. I'm sure with a highly competitive pool of people that had talent and interest to do this job, but was selected and ended up starting here April of 2015. I've been here now over 7 years, and I've loved every minute of it. Jobs are challenging, but they're also highly rewarding as well.
Joe, when most administrators or most new athletic directors go to an institution, you're drinking out of a fire hose to begin with, but you had the extra job of building a brand new stadium. How did that come out?
Yeah, every one of your life experiences kind of, makes you who you are and how you approach things. And I had the really good fortune to have been involved with a stadium project at the University of Texas. When I was at the University of Oklahoma, we did a full renovation of that facility. And then I got to Michigan and was one of 4 people on staff that were kind of the key group that did the full renovation of Michigan Stadium. So I had that in my background and my portfolio of experiences. And so coming here, what was different, in many ways it was running the same game plan, but what was different was it was a brand new facility. So it was a greenfield construction site. There wasn't existing conditions to kind of plan and manage around. And so that was, a clean piece of paper. The design was pretty much baked when I onboarded. The project had been approved about 4 months before I started here at CSU, but we hadn't sold any premium seating. We had done some effort on major gift fundraising, about $20 million. But, in order for it to be a viable project, we needed to, make the financial model work. And so that was, my responsibility, the responsibility of the staff that was in place. And it was great. We've been operating the building now for 5 years, and it has exceeded everyone's expectations. It was also unique for the university and the community because we were moving a stadium that had served the university for 50 years, that was 4 miles from campus, and we were bringing the college FBS football experience back to the Central University core. And that was awesome because people would attend games at Hughes, but they never really associated that with an opportunity to kind of experience their university. They'd come in, they'd watch the game, and they'd go home, and they never intersect with the campus. And now for the last 5 years, you just get that wonderful dynamic of people that come in for a football weekend and they spend time on their university campus with their children, sharing with their families. And that's the piece that we were missing here, because I believe, the purpose of intercollegiate athletics is multifold, but one of the major purposes is engagement. And we connect community to campus better than any other opportunity or way that people can intersect with the university. So it was very gratifying to get Canvas Stadium up and running and serving that purpose for the institution.
Yeah, well said, Joe. And that stadium is gorgeous. I've seen it, and it may not be the biggest stadium in the country, but it's certainly one of the very nicest stadiums in all the country. It is beautiful.
Gene, it's okay to say it's the best. You're trying to get those words out of your mouth, but they didn't quite make it there. I honestly, I feel like I've got enough experience building these things that I can say it's the best. It's not the biggest, but it is a pretty special place to experience a football game with a lot of unique opportunities to spectate and enjoy a football Saturday.
Absolutely. Joe, you've worked with some great people. You mentioned Bill Martin. I think you were with, well, were with Chris Del Conte. You were with Kirby Hocutt. Were you with Jim Livengood?
I never worked with Jim. No, no. I feel like I kind of did in some ways, just because I learned so much about him through Chris, and then have built a relationship with Jim over the years, but never had the privilege to work with him.
What do you think are some of the main characters that all those people had? Now they've all got their different personalities. Chris Del Conte is definitely a different personality than a lot
Yeah.
of others. But what qualities do those folks have that gives them an opportunity to be a great leader?
Yeah, I think all of them, and what I've assessed too, and just as I've observed leadership and tried to kind of channel those qualities, I think every good leader, has to have a strong desire to serve. I don't think any one of those people walks in the office and thinks about what they're going to do for themselves in a given day. They look about around them and think about their staff and their students and others within the community, and how they can serve others. And I think that in my mind is, really probably the primary chief quality of a great leader. I think when you are kind of have that service orientation, you're also probably a pretty acute listener. You learn about people and how you can serve them if you're paying attention to the things that they're sharing with you. So I think that's also a really strong quality that's necessary. And you've experienced this yourself, and you don't understand it until you're in this role. But I think humility is a big part of what serves the people that you serve well, but also yourself, because there's just certain aspects of this job that you're going to go to your knees at some point, and the fall's a little bit easier if you don't think too highly of yourself in that way, where you let your ego kind of interfere with your ability to do the work that you're charged to do.
Yeah. Gene Corrigan always used to tell me, take your job very seriously, but don't take yourself very seriously. You're going to be criticized. You're going to be second guessed. That's part of it. But you better develop some thick skin, because there's times that you're going to need that thick skin, Gene. And sure enough, he was right.
He absolutely, those are very wise words he shared with you.
Joe, what do you do to get away from the everyday 24/7 routine that we have for you know football coaches and directors of athletics? And different people hike, different people are interested in golf. What do you do to take a break and refresh yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I don't have any kind of really absorbing hobbies, but what I try and do consistently is just find a way to have some time to myself. So that's moments to work out. I found with the way my day goes, typically it's best if I do it in the morning. So I try and um, get a morning workout in, and that can be a run, or stretching, or some lifting, or a combination of those things. I don't swim anymore. I've thought a lot about trying to get that back into my life, but it just access to facilities and the convenience that I need sometimes to make my day efficient. Swimming just doesn't seem to integrate well into it. I really enjoy reading, and I'd have to say in the last 7 years, I haven't done enough of that. I found ways to do more of that in other roles, but I just don't seem to do enough of it. And I keep trying to recommit myself to reading. I've got about a stack of 8 or 9 books that I need to rip through, and hopefully I can find some time this summer to do that. I love
Joe,
music. I love music too.
oh, that's great. Can you mention just a couple of the books? I'm sure people would be interested in hearing.
Right now, yeah, right now we're reading a book in preparation for our head coaches retreat that is next week, and it's by Jeff Jensen. I don't know, probably there's a lot of people that are listening that might have familiarity with Jeff, but it's how to build and sustain a championship culture. And I just got a book in the mail yesterday that's The Way of the Shepherd, and I'm excited to read that. That was a recommendation from David Matlin. I was talking to David last week. He's the AD at the University of Hawaii, and he said that was a good reference for him and something that he's shared with his staff. But I usually like to read, books on leadership, books on organizational culture. I love reading biographies. That's one of the things I really enjoy. I don't get too much into fiction. I kind of stay in that lane of nonfiction where it's more, personal development and learning.
I never read fiction either. I was always trying to read biographies about Pete Rozelle or George Steinbrenner or Pope Paul II or Bill Belichick, just people. Bill Walsh was somebody that had a big influence on me, who I got to know personally. But those kinds of books certainly show you that everyone's going to have some tough times, and how you react to it is really, really important because everybody under you is looking at you. And if you panic, they're going to panic.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I've got a cultural expectations that we talk about within the department, and I talk a lot about the qualities of leadership, and one of those things that I discuss with the staff is, always strive for calm and consistency. And it goes back to what you were just saying. If you're faced with moments of adversity, I think the team around you responds better if you keep your cool and you're measured in how you respond and the way that you think about it. It certainly gives you, an opportunity to kind of forge the best path forward. But when I talk about all the things I think that are qualities of a leader, when I talk about cultural expectations, the first one I share with the staff is I believe everyone's a leader. I think everyone on our staff has a responsibility to leadership, and I want them to feel empowered to do not only their job but contribute to ways to improve the organization.
right. Well said. Joe, I would be remiss if I didn't say something and ask you something about NIL. Uh, what what is Colorado State doing, and what are some of the other schools in the Mountain West doing when it comes to name, image, and likeness?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit about the league first. So we just are coming off our spring meetings, which is joint council, ADs, faculty athletic reps, and SWAs, and then we just had our board of director meetings, which are the president's summer meeting, and obviously NIL was a big part of all those discussions. And we did a roundtable with the ADs just to kind of get an idea of what each school is doing. I'd say each is about where we are at, and that is, July 1st. Obviously, we were, informing our students that it was now permissible for them to monetize their name, image, and likeness. It was kind of that moment of congratulations. You're the CEO of your own business enterprise now, and that comes with all the risk and rewards associated with that. So we spent a lot of time trying to educate our students to the possibilities and to the things that they had to be mindful of in order to, maintain their eligibility, so they wouldn't put themselves in a position to make, an unnecessary sacrifice there. And, it's pretty simple, right? It's just quid pro quo. You got to do something for something. And I think our students understood that pretty well. We looked for opportunities to kind of bring uh, uh, some of the technology that's provided by some of the third-party vendors into the department. We're still making those assessments of what we think will be the most sustainable path for our students there. But we went initially with Compass. We felt that they had some educational modules and a way for us to, or students rather, report their activities, and that was a requirement of our state law. But now we're really giving strong thought to, to other um, technologies that kind of link students to the marketplace. And then we've worked with our College of Business to put together some programming. We've had a few professors that want to help students with brand building and just baseline understanding of how they would construct, a business around their name, image, and likeness. And then as we've seen too, the pure kind of NIL opportunities are kind of segueing, morphing into something that may or may not have been intended. I don't think any of us really kind of saw this clearly, but this concept of collectives, and we're just kind of watching how the world develops around that. We've got some alumni that have expressed interest in collectives, and we've participated in conversations with them to help them get informed about the space, and we've put them in touch with others that have been able to put framework and structure in place to do that. And I think we as an institution will support those activities as much as we can within the framework of what the NCAA will permit. And I think we'll get some traction there. I think we've got people in the community that see that that's an opportunity to help a student. But in every case, I think we've been trying to keep it on the learning side of it too. I think what's so beneficial about intercollegiate athletics, and I think should be a part of our future, is just keeping everything as much tied to an educational model as possible.
Yeah. Joe, I've got calls from several coaches. I've got a lot of coaching friends, as do you, and all of them were very, very happy to hear Ryan Day's comment last week that he would probably need somewhere in the area of $13 million to keep his team together. And a lot of people didn't like to hear that, but the coaches that I talked to said, well, somebody got it out there now, and at least this can be talked about, because Coach Saban and Coach Fisher had their little brouhaha, but nobody knew, there wasn't a whole lot of figures thrown out or whatever. But what were your coach's thoughts on what Ryan Day at Ohio State had to say?
Um, I think we're all still trying to dissect it. I appreciate Ryan's comments, and you're right. He was really the first coach that's operating a program at an extremely high level that's trying to compete for national championships every year. Say what he felt was going to be necessary. I don't know that the Ohio State experience is the experience that's going to occur across every FBS playing program. Like any marketplace, there's demand for the highest level of talent, and I look at where we're at in the group of five. We've got championship aspirations, but they're probably not national championship aspirations. We want to be the most competitive in our peer group, which is really defined by our most immediate peers, the conference, the Mountain West Conference peers, and then those that are in the G5. And the way that things are structured in football, we'd love to be a participant in New Year's Day bowls, and maybe find ourselves like Cincinnati and reach the playoff at some point. But I don't know if that means that we'll need $13 million to keep our roster intact. I think for us, NIL might feel and look a little bit different. It may be more of its, supplementing what most people have felt it's a more traditional student athlete experience. I mean, is it $3,000 a month, for select students? Is it $5,000 a month for select students? Is it less than that? Um, you know, even in our case, I think if a student was getting NIL or money through a collective that was $500 a month, I mean, that's a pretty big deal if you're trying to live on a stipend and cost of attendance.
It
Every
sure
little bit
sure
helps.
beats what we got when you went to Michigan and when I got it when we went
Yeah,
to Springfield.
and
We
that,
live to tell about it.
yeah, that's what's been hard too. You just, you want to reflect back on your own experience so much. And I think for me, you learned a lot of valuable lessons, through having to manage your resources. And I also recognize that, we've got students on our campus that don't have a lot of family support. So NIL is a terrific way for them to, if they're at those higher levels, even to help, meet some needs that are unmet for their families, not just for themselves. So I don't know, Gene, it's a brave new world for all of us. And, we're going to have to figure it out. You know, Not to kind of keep rolling on this, but we had in the Mountain West meetings, we were with the football staffs, and just the whole concept of the transformation committee, and all the rules that have been in place for the last 40 years to try and legislate competitive equity, that may ultimately disappear. What we arrived at in a discussion with the coaches, the ads and the coaches, is you're only going to be able to put, in the case of football, 11 people on the field at any given time. In basketball, it's 5. In other sports, they have their limits of who gets to participate in any moment when the clock is running. And that's when competitive equity begins, is when you match your kids against their kids, and they get a chance to compete. And I don't know if 35 assistant football coaches are going to make a difference. Then you got to figure out a way to manage all 35 of those voices, right? And keep them on
Right.
the same page, and get them to buy into a culture. Is it easier to be at 10 or 35? I don't know, so.
Joe, let me ask you another question. Far away from the NIL, I consider you to be among the most ethical and honest ADs that I've ever been with and been around and got to know. You are as as moral and ethical as anyone. But what advice would you give to a younger Joe Parker when he was at the University of Texas or when he went to Washington State? What a piece of advice would you give him?
um, yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, as it relates to integrity, I guess, I mean, just, I was very, very fortunate to have parents that made it very clear what right and wrong was, and that you didn't want to test the areas of gray. Um, you know, when it came to accountability, my dad made it really clear. My mom made it really clear what the expectation was, and I just, recognized early and throughout my entire career that I never wanted to put myself in a position where I felt uncomfortable about a decision or how I'd managed a particular situation. I want to be able to go home and comfortably put my head on the pillow every night, and not have to think about consequences for a decision where I may have compromised my integrity. So I think what I would just tell a young Joe Parker is that those things are important, and if you veer down the wrong path, it's hard to get back, and it's hard to regain trust of the people around you. So just don't do it. I mean, you may feel like you're making some sacrifices, possibly, but ultimately you're not. I mean, you've got to have integrity. Um, and this kind of relates directly to it. So, and it wasn't my advice, but it was advice that came to me through DeLoss Dodds. My first time I ever sat down with DeLoss after I had been hired into a permanent role, full-time employment after my internship, I asked him, what's the single most important piece of advice you could give to anyone who's starting a career in college sports? And he said, without hesitation, never burn a bridge. And I think that relates back to the integrity piece too. And that was pretty clear to me then, but it's even more clear to me now that you want to treat people appropriately and you want to treat people in a respectful way. You're going to have disagreements with folks, but you never want to be a person that's known for gossip or spreading information that's inappropriate, untrue, or even otherwise. I mean, I want to be viewed as someone that maintains the highest level of confidence and confidentiality. And he was saying that, I think, just from the perspective, as I mean, our universe is pretty small. They say people are 6 degrees of separation from anyone else on the planet, but I'd say, in intercollegiate athletics, you're two, right? I mean, you don't know someone, you know someone that knows that someone pretty well. And if you've had any kind of indiscretion or any kind of poor choices in your career or life experience, it's going to be known. Not maybe widely discussed, but it's going to be known when it's kind of that critical moment of when someone's trying to make a decision about, do they want you and their organization. And so you want to make sure that there's never a blemish.
Joe, I think that your wife, Jen, is one of the great directors of athletics wives in the country. I mean, she is just a pleasure to be with. She's smart, she's articulate, she's very supportive. And those two children of yours, Emma and Will, have really become successes. Talk about your family and your family life, moving around and following you and supporting you in your profession.
Thanks, Gene. That's a great question, and it is a softball one, but it's one that means more than anything we probably talked about today. I've got a remarkable life partner in my wife, Jen. Feel so privileged that she and I found each other on this planet. She's from the UK. She came here to pursue a job opportunity, and we met when we were in Austin, Texas. And I the one thing that's consistent whenever Jen meets someone, they always tell me that I outkick my coverage, and I think that's probably the way it is for most of us. But it's funny. I don't know if you remember David McWilliams. He coached football at the University of Texas.
I do. I got to know David. He was the center on that '63 national championship team. Yes, I do.
He was a math major at Texas, so
Was he?
Really smart man. Yeah, but David, he early in my career, he was one of my references, and I can't remember what job I'd applied for, but I was doing an on-campus interview, and they'd already reached out to references before I got to campus, and they said, we talked to Dave McWilliams, and we asked him what your greatest strength was. Do you have any idea what he said? And I said, I don't, something that, I don't know, I'm a great leader. And they said, no, he said, your wife is your greatest strength. And so I can never deny that she is. But so there's Jen has been a huge influence, ongoing influence in my life, and she understands just the nature of this work and is so supportive of it, and is a big part of it too. As there's just so many demands outside of the traditional workday that a supportive spouse makes a huge difference. And then we've got two kids that are proud graduates of Colorado State University. They finished last May. They're not twins, but they ended up in the same grade. And both of them left with jobs, and they're on their career trajectories and very excited about what's ahead for them. Don't see them enough. Our son lives in Denver, or Dallas rather, and our daughter lives in Denver. And even though she's in state, she gets busy, we get busy, but what we're going to try and get everyone to the Michigan game in September. So our season opening game is against the Wolverines, and both of them obviously grew up in the state, and they're both Rams, so they want to be a part of that game.
That'll be exciting for your whole family.
Yep, it will be.
Oh, yeah. That'll be exciting for your whole family. Well, Joe, I knew you'd be great, um, but you hit this one out of the park. You really did. Thank you so much for doing this. Well, our time is up on this week's podcast. I want to thank Joe Parker for joining us. He did a marvelous job. And for those young administrators out there, this is a podcast really worth listening to, as Joe Parker is a great person and a great AD. We're out of time on this week's On the Fly College Edition. I'm your host, Gene Defilippo. Thanks for your time this time, and we'll see you next time.